Right now, all this talk about kumbaya coming together, maybe not so much. Only 34 days till we go over the so-called fiscal cliff, and both parties that are on the road now pushing their plan to keep America fiscally safe and sound. We will discuss. And next, Rice under fire. UN Ambassador Susan Rice still in the hot seat for her comments in the aftermath of the Benghazi attack. And her second attempt to Capitol Hill diplomacy today, not so good. And later, Cops on camera. No, you haven't accidentally turned on an episode of Cops. Instead, a new Supreme Court decision or non-decision will allow you, me, and anybody else to film cops while on the job. But while I get it, I'm not so crazy about it. We'll talk about that as well. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us this Wednesday evening, November 28th. As you can see, a lot to cover in the next 60 minutes. Now, you know how when people see a car wreck, often they rubberneck, drives me crazy here and slows down traffic for no reason, but they often say it almost looked like this thing happened in slow motion. Well, you can almost say the same thing about where we're going with the fiscal cliff. We all know it's bad. We all know for more than a year now that this thing's been coming, but like most things in Washington these days, nobody's been willing to do the tough work to come to some kind of agreement here and stop it and hit the brakes before we get to, yes, the cliff on 12/31. Now we find ourselves with just 34 days from this headache here, and both parties only now seemingly figuring out what they're willing to not only fight hardest for, but maybe concede to. Today, though, may also mark a turning point in the debate over here to there, because now the president fully involved, and he's turning to the public for help. And I think, at least, Andrew, with a message here that's easy to understand that you can stick on a bumper sticker.
Well, and he certainly thinks that way, Rich. The president making news for two reasons today. First, he's officially on the record saying any deal needs to include a tax increase on the nation's top earners. And the president clearly thinks he's got the backing of the American people on that position.
But our first job is to make sure that taxes on middle-class families don't go up. And since we all theoretically agree on that, we should go ahead and get that done. So today, I'm asking Congress to listen to the people who sent us here to serve. I'm asking Americans all across the country to make your voice heard. Tell members of Congress what a $2,000 tax hike would mean to you.
As for Republicans, there's some talk of bipartisan cooperation, but only with some provisos.
In order to try to come to an agreement, Republicans are willing to put revenue on the table, but it's time for the president and Democrats to get serious about the spending problem that our country has.
Notice the speaker's mention of tax revenue, not rates. That's critical since the other Republican headline on the cliff came from Oklahoma's Tom Cole, who has bucked his party's leadership and now says let's strike a deal on raising rates on the top 2% and move on.
If they're 98% of the American people, if we agree their taxes shouldn't go up, and evidently we do, then we ought to take that off the table. I just think that's the right thing to do. I'm not interested in using them in leverage in a debate. I don't think it's appropriate. Let's do that, and let's continue to fight.
It sounded like a breakthrough, but that idea was almost immediately rejected by the number 2 Republican in the House.
Increasing marginal rates is income tax rates is not the way to produce growth and to put people back to work.
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. All right, let's get into this debate. For that, I want to bring one of our favorites here, Tom Doherty, former advisor to New York Governor George Pataki, and now a partner with Mercury Public Strategies. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author, and you've already met Andrew. Okay, last night, Tom, we got into the heavy lifting of this, and we went into what some of the deductions could be that be on the table, what some of the entitlement reform could look like, blah, blah, blah. This thing's easy to understand. And I don't see how the Republicans can answer this, and the poll numbers seem to suggest 2/3 of Americans, or at least with the president, to say, if he says, all right, 98% of you make less than $250,000, I'm going to keep the tax rates just the way they are. The Bush tax cuts, we're going to make them permanent. I'll go sign it right now, I'll get my little presidential pen, send it to my desk, and there we go. Republicans, let's talk about the top 2% after we get that done for Americans, or regular Americans out there. Then we'll figure out where to go on your end. How do Republicans answer that and say, no, 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 we can't do anything for the 98 till we take care of the 2? Forget about the policy of it, the politics of it.
Okay, so it's not as simple as you'd like to make it out to be, because clearly this is a negotiation, okay? But I agree with your premise. The 98% should be held harmless. They certainly don't need a tax increase, okay? The 2%. If we tax the 2% as the president would like, we will raise about, give or take, $80 billion a year. Over the course of 10 years, that will bring in about $800 billion. We were running deficits of $1.5 trillion a year. Where are we fixing our problem? Raise my taxes. I'm all for it. And I think Republicans would be very smart to say, you know what, Mr. President, we agree with you. We solved your problem. Go fix it.
Everything you say is 100% right, Tom. I won't quibble with an iota of it, except here's the only thing. In every negotiation and every leverage, the president knows at the end of the day that if he doesn't get rates raised in the front end, he'll never get it on the back end. So the only way that he's going to be able to get this thing done is to use leverage between now and 1231, before he puts entitlement reform on the table, before he talks about some deductions that will hurt, by the way, middle-class Americans too, if they're cut, not just the top-end folks. That for another night. He should play the card right now. And if you were on the side advising him, you'd say play this card now.
But my point, Richard, is this, is that we make like we're raising taxes just on Warren Buffett. We're not. We're raising taxes on people who make $250,000. Now, I understand that if you believe that if you make 60 and you're a single guy, you got a nice $60,000 a year job, $250, you're wealthy, you're rich. But you and I know,
you and I think it should be a half a mil. I think it should be a half a mil, maybe $1 million.
Right.
250 is not rich anymore. I get it.
But Richard, even when you do that, I'm not arguing the 250. You want to do 250, fine. You forget that they have 2 kids in college. So the point is that you're only bringing in $800 billion over 10 years.
It's a starting point, not an ending point.
Richard, it's not even close to being in the ballpark.
But there is no scenario where we're going to be able to close the gap here. Whatever we're going to come up to is, can he get to half of it?
But why doesn't the president, when you have Boehner, as you know, in the days right after the election, said revenues are on the table? The president...
Oh, revenue and rates are 2 different things.
But listen...
Come on.
Listen, everybody knows that we think we're at a point that in this negotiation, taxes are going up on people over $250,000. We think that's done. Where on the other side are the entitlement reforms? Where are the changes in spending? That's what's killing us.
I think we got to get some of this. I think down deep, the president would love to put some entitlement reform on the table, have the Republicans propose it so that he doesn't have to eat it, but he knows he's got to do something with Medicare. I think maybe in the next 4 years, you could see at a date to be determined, the retirement age goes up for Social Security and stuff like that.
But why can't they all act like adults? Listen, you had Simpson.
Come on, let's not make it sound like
Richard,
the infancy's come from the White House.
2 years ago this month, Simpson Bowles came out. The president's own debt commission, all of these programs were in that report. All he had to do was say, I am putting my presidency on fixing the fiscal viability of our nation.
Gentlemen,
Democrats would have been pissed off, Republicans, everybody would have been ticked off at it. Who's against Simpson Bowles?
The only point I'd like to make, let's say that Tom's numbers are 1,000% accurate.
I'm not making them up.
The problem with this is that to the American people, it sounds like the Republican Party is only interested in protecting the rich. Now, you can define rich as any way you want to in terms of income.
I don't want to defend Donald Trump or Warren Buffett.
But that's the way it sounds to the little guy.
I agree with you. That's why we should say this.
And that's the problem that the Republican Party has.
I agree with you.
We're going to have a deal before 1231 where they're going to agree on the 98 and very little else.
Yes. I think it's going to be that and kicking the can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They better not kick the can or we're in deep trouble.
Well, I can tell you who may be in deep trouble. That could be Susan Rice, or it could be the folks that are going front and center trying to scuttle this possible nomination. For somebody who wants to be the nation's top diplomat, he's got an awful lot of trouble here playing the diplomatic game in D.C. We're going to talk about what happened today, yesterday, and where this goes from here.